When a staff member discovered dark strands of hair scattered across the bathroom floor that Saturday morning, she thought nothing of it, just teenage girls getting ready for the day. But as she turned toward the stairwell, her eyes caught something that would haunt her forever: a green nylon rope, a pair of white socks, and 2 young lives stolen in the darkness. What appeared to be a tragic double loss would soon unravel into something far more sinister. This is the story of Charnel Hogg and Mara Angelrey. May 26, 2018, Stella Boarding School in South Africa's Northwest Province. The sun had barely risen when Crystal, a dormitory employee, began her morning routine. It was just after 6 a.m. She walked through the quiet hallways, checking to see if students were awake. Everything seemed normal, ordinary, until it wasn't. As Crystal passed the restroom, she noticed strands of dark hair on the floor. Nothing unusual for a girls' dormitory. She kept walking, but when she reached the staircase, her world stopped. There, tied to the railing, was a green rope, and below it, suspended in the air, a pair of feet in white socks. 17-year-old Charnel Hogg hung motionless near the railing. Minutes later, authorities made a second devastating discovery. Charnel's best friend, Mara Angelrey, was found in the first-floor bathroom. A backpack strap was wrapped tightly around her neck. 2 inseparable friends, both dead. At first glance, everything pointed to a double tragedy, but investigators would soon discover that appearances can be deceiving. To understand what happened that morning, we need to go back to where it all began. Charnel Hogg grew up on a cattle farm in Dellerville, a small rural town where farming traditions ran deep. She lived with her father Ronnie, her stepmother Anna, and Anna's son Eston, who she loved like a brother. Her parents had divorced when she was young, but they maintained a friendly relationship. Her mother, Sonia, worked at a tourism lodge in a nearby resort area. Before boarding school, Charnel split her time between homes, 3 weeks with her father on the farm, 1 week with her mother. But when she enrolled at Stella Boarding School, those visits became less frequent. Something else was taking up her time, someone else. Mara Angelrey came from a family deeply rooted in the community. Her father, Stefan, was a respected drilling specialist. Her mother, Ryanette, worked as a caregiver and had even performed music at Charnel's parents' wedding years earlier. Mara had an older sister, Rianne, and a close-knit family known for their warmth and stability. Stefan affectionately called his younger daughter Marenker because of her calm, thoughtful nature. Charnel and Mara had been childhood friends, inseparable during kindergarten, but life pulled them apart when Charnel moved away. For 8 years, they lived separate lives. Then fate brought them back together at Stella Boarding School in 8th grade. They became roommates, best friends once again. The 2 girls shared everything: a love for animals, a passion for horseback riding, dreams for the future. Charnel hoped to turn her photography hobby into a career, though her father believed she had the looks for modeling. Mara excelled in mathematics and science. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, inspired by her childhood on the farm. On weekends, they often visited each other's families. Ronnie treated Mara like his own daughter. The girls seemed happy. Their lives appeared stable, but beneath the surface, something dark was brewing. March 2017, that's when Charnel first noticed him. Xander, 18 years old, former student, athletic build, thick dark hair, striking green eyes, confident, charismatic, dangerous. Although Xander had graduated, he still hung around the boarding school area. His family background was complicated. His parents, Monty and Mircha, had divorced when he was young. He lived on his father's farm about 50 miles from Stella, but occasionally visited his mother. Their relationship was distant. Xander's mother had struggled to become pregnant. When she finally gave birth to him after a difficult pregnancy, she became intensely protective. Overprotective. She defended his behavior no matter what. His father, Monty, a former police officer, raised him with strict discipline. Hunting, fishing, shooting, outdoor pursuits, these activities defined their relationship. Despite his athletic achievements in rugby, Xander had a reputation. Arguments with teachers, fights with classmates, confrontations with adults. His temper was explosive. His parents were constantly called to the school, but his mother always made excuses. She insisted his behavior was just part of his unique personality. After graduation, Xander didn't continue his education. He worked on his father's farm instead. His social media presence was limited, mostly photos of firearms and hunting trophies. He lived a relatively private life, but his looks attracted attention, especially from young women. At a school event for alumni, Charnel and Xander's paths crossed. Their first conversation was brief, but there was an instant attraction. Charnel, a high school senior, was drawn to his confidence, his charm, his attention. The relationship moved fast. In the beginning, Xander seemed perfect. He showered Charnel with attention, did everything to please her. When it was time to meet her family, he made an excellent impression. Ronnie, initially cautious, appreciated Xander's interest in farming. When Xander helped with farm work, Ronnie was won over completely. But Mara saw something different. She was the first to notice changes in her best friend. Slowly, Charnel began pulling away. She made excuses to avoid spending time with Mara and other friends. She blamed it on being busy, being tired, but Mara knew the truth. The changes coincided with Xander's growing presence in Charnel's life. At first, his controlling behavior was subtle. He asked who she was spending time with, what she was doing. Charnel interpreted this as caring, as love. But gradually, the demands escalated. He wanted access to her phone, her social media accounts, her private messages, and Charnel gave in. She believed his jealousy proved how much he cared. Then came prom. What should have been an exciting experience became stressful. Xander insisted on approving her dress. He dictated her makeup, her hairstyle, everything. Charnel complied to avoid conflict. She confided in a few friends that she felt uncomfortable, but she didn't fully understand how serious the situation was becoming. Xander's grip tightened. He started interfering with her friendships, criticizing people he thought were bad influences. If Charnel spent time with friends, he demanded detailed explanations. To avoid arguments, she stopped seeing people. Even her meetings with Mara became rare. Mara tried to talk to her. She pointed out that Xander's behavior wasn't normal, wasn't healthy, but Charnel made excuses. She convinced herself these were just temporary issues. She believed he would change. He didn't. The control intensified. The aggression grew. Charnel's family began noticing changes too. She seemed less confident, more withdrawn. They attributed it to school stress. Only Mara recognized the real problem. But by then, Xander had successfully isolated Charnel from almost everyone who cared about her. January 2018. Charnel made a decision. She ended the relationship. The controlling behavior, the constant monitoring, the heated arguments where he would physically intimidate her, the occasional marks left on her body after confrontations. It was too much. Mara and others close to Charnel had seen the warning signs. Now, Charnel was finally taking action. But Xander didn't accept it. He threatened to harm himself, claimed he couldn't live without her, sent endless messages trying to manipulate her emotions. Despite the pressure, Charnel stood firm. The relationship was over. Then Xander turned his rage toward Mara. He blamed her, accused her of turning Charnel against him. He sent threatening messages, insulting texts. Mara, frightened, told her father. Stefan immediately contacted Xander and demanded the harassment stop. The threats temporarily subsided, but Xander's obsession didn't fade. A few months later, Charnel grew closer to Brandon Victor. They'd been friends since she was 14. Brandon was a high school senior with an excellent reputation, kind, athletic, respected. He offered Charnel the emotional support she desperately needed. Their friendship slowly evolved into something more, but they kept it quiet. They both knew Xander was still watching. And he was. Even after the breakup, Xander stalked Charnel. He showed up unexpectedly at places she frequented, continued sending messages. His refusal to let go created a constant atmosphere of tension and fear. Charnel and Brandon were careful. They avoided public places where they might run into him. They kept their relationship private. But by May 2018, the situation had reached a breaking point. The pressure was building, and something terrible was about to happen. May 25th, 2018, around midnight. Charnel, Mara, and Brandon sat together in the girls' dormitory room. Brandon had broken school rules to be there, sneaking in to comfort Charnel. She'd been receiving threats from Xander again. They drank coffee, talked, tried to ease the tension. Then at 1 a.m., Charnel's phone rang. It was Xander. She put the call on speaker so Mara and Brandon could hear. At first, his voice was calm. He asked her to come outside, to meet him. She refused. His tone changed instantly, cold, threatening. Then came the chilling words that would haunt Brandon forever. "You'll regret what I'm going to do tonight." The call ended. Charnel was visibly shaken. Brandon offered to stay, but she insisted he return to the boys' dormitory. She was worried about getting caught, getting in trouble. Around 2 a.m., Brandon left. It was the last time he would see the girls alive. Hours later, at 4:17 a.m., Charnel's mother, Sonia, woke up to a disturbing text message. "Mom, I just wanted to say I love you and I'm sorry." The word sorry was misspelled. Charnel was always careful with grammar. Sonia immediately knew something was wrong. She tried calling. The call went straight to voicemail. Panicked, she contacted Ronnie. Ronnie checked his phone. 2 messages from Charnel. The first, sent at 3:42 a.m., contained a photo of Charnel in her undergarments with the caption, "I love you, Brandon." The second message, sent at 4:17 a.m., read, "Dad, I'm sorry, Mara and I are leaving." Ronnie's blood ran cold. He immediately contacted the school principal, Richard Hobson. Something was terribly wrong. Brandon also received a late-night message from Charnel. When he tried calling back, there was no answer. He sensed something was wrong, but didn't yet understand the gravity of the situation. Crystal's discovery that morning launched a chaotic investigation. When Richard Hobson received her frantic call about finding Charnel's body, he could barely process the information. Crystal dropped the phone and ran for help. Minutes later, authorities arrived to find both girls dead. Charnel hung from the staircase railing. Mara was in the first-floor bathroom, a backpack strap around her neck. Police initially assumed the girls had taken their own lives, but something didn't add up. The marks on their necks didn't match typical cases. Investigators began suspecting foul play. When Ronnie arrived at the school, he rushed toward his daughter's body. Police tried to stop him, warning that disturbing the scene could compromise evidence. But Ronnie, consumed by grief, couldn't stop himself. With his brother Lewis's help, they took Charnel down. Stefan arrived shortly after. When he saw Mara, his grief turned to rage. He immediately declared this was no accident, and he knew exactly who was responsible: Xander. Principal Hobson contacted private investigator Chris Sanders, someone he'd worked with before. Sanders arrived quickly and began gathering information. One of his first interviews was with Brandon Victor. Brandon shared the messages he'd received from Charnel. He also revealed Xander's ongoing obsession and threats. The evidence began pointing toward a third party. Fingerprints on the rope and backpack strap were critical. Xander's name kept coming up in conversations with students. Sanders identified him as the primary suspect. Stefan, growing impatient with the investigation's pace, took matters into his own hands. He drove to Xander's home to confront him directly, a dangerous move that could have escalated everything. When Stefan arrived at Xander's farm, a heated confrontation erupted. Stefan, consumed by grief and anger, accused Xander of murdering the girls. Xander's father, Monty, tried to intervene. The argument was intense. Then Chris Sanders arrived. He managed to calm Stefan and convince Xander to come to the police station. During the drive, Sanders applied steady psychological pressure. He questioned Xander, pushed him, and eventually Xander broke. He confessed. He admitted killing Charnel out of jealousy, and he admitted killing Mara because she was a witness. Sanders recorded everything. At the police station, Xander repeated his confession during formal questioning. He described how he'd planned everything, how he'd intended to stage the deaths to avoid suspicion, how he'd snuck into the dormitory. The details were chilling. Investigators found disturbing evidence of his obsession: messages, photographs, journal entries, all stored on his phone. The picture was clear. Xander's inability to accept the breakup had driven him to commit an unthinkable act. March 2019. Xander's trial began. The evidence against him was overwhelming. One of the most critical testimonies came from Anastasia Fesser, an acquaintance from fishing competitions. She described a phone call she'd received from Xander the day before the murders. He was angry, furious. He stated he wouldn't allow Charnel to live her life without him. He said he would make her life unbearable. Anastasia admitted she hadn't taken his words seriously at the time. She dismissed them as an emotional outburst. She deeply regretted not reporting it, not warning someone. Her testimony highlighted the premeditated nature of Xander's actions. Brandon also testified. He recounted that final evening, the threatening phone call, Xander's chilling words, the fear in Charnel's eyes. His testimony was powerful and emotional. The defense attempted to argue that Xander's confession had been coerced, but Chris Sanders's testimony and the recorded statements undermined that claim. Psychological evaluations describe Xander as emotionally unstable, with a pathological fixation on Charnel. His jealousy, his need for control, his inability to cope with rejection. These factors had created a deadly combination. The role of Xander's family was also examined. His mother's excessive protectiveness, her refusal to acknowledge his behavioral problems. His father, Monty, initially acknowledged his son's guilt and stated that justice needed to be served. But after Xander was sentenced to 2 life terms, Monty reversed his position. He accused the legal system of injustice and hired lawyers to appeal the verdict. For the families of Charnel and Mara, there was some small comfort in knowing the two inseparable friends were laid to rest side by side, together in death as they had been in life. This case serves as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can exist in personal relationships, the importance of recognizing warning signs, the critical need to take threats seriously. It raises questions about upbringing, emotional support, and how unresolved struggles can lead to devastating consequences. Charnel tried to leave, she tried to reclaim her life, but Xander's obsession wouldn't allow it. And Mara, a loyal friend who stood by Charnel through everything, paid the ultimate price for being a witness. 2 young lives, 2 bright futures, stolen in the darkness of a boarding school stairwell by someone who claimed to love one of them. This is why we share these stories, not to sensationalize tragedy, but to educate, to raise awareness, to help others recognize the warning signs of controlling obsessive behavior before it's too late. Stay aware, stay safe, and never ignore the red flags.